Hello, and welcome to another episode of Penetrate Radio. I'm your host, Lucy Baldwin, and today I have with me Laila Matthews, Dani Granaroli, and Holly Kiefer. And we are going to talk about existential kink and shadow alchemy, shadow work, and somatics, being in the body. And what does that mean? What are we talking about? How do we do it? And how does that help us with specifically existential kink?
I could just start out and share what my inspiration was for this and just what got me inspired in thinking. So I was reading an anatomy and physiology textbook, learning about the nervous system. And I guess I kind of like this because it makes it unwoo, but like also, anyway, the woo and the material are deeply intertwined. But anyway, I was reading my anatomy and physiology textbook, learning about the nervous system. And it was talking about how, really your nervous system is the limit and the extent of your experience of your environment. And so all of your sensory information is made up of information that's coming to you from receptors in your body. And we're familiar with the general names for the senses like taste, touch, sight, sound, and feeling. Or I guess feeling is touch. What's the one I'm missing? Smell. Smell, taste, sight, sound, and touch. And we're familiar with those, but those all have submodalities of types of reception that, can be experienced by those. So like just an easy example is that like in vision, you can have color or not color or intensity of color or right? Like, so it can be very saturated all the way down to black and white. That's a submodality of vision. And you can also have like intensity and brightness. So it can be bright or dim. And then I think, there's other stuff that goes on with processing, like how far is it from you? Is it in a frame? But those are kind of beyond this conversation. The point is that all of your senses have submodalities like temperature and pressure and texture and pain and humidity, even. You can feel humidity. So the point is that our somatic experience is actually very rich. And what that really got me thinking about, and what I'm so excited to talk in more in depth with Dani and Holly here today, because this is really their, I think, scope of genius, um, is, knowing more about what the somatic input is can help us contact that somatic place more. Because existential kink is really primarily a somatic practice. And I've heard a lot of people be like, mentally I get it, but doing the somatic part is actually hard. And there are many people, and perhaps you listening might be able to relate to this, have even a hard time knowing if they're feeling anything somatically at all. So anyway, that's what got me thinking today.
Yeah, that's awesome, Layla. And so we were talking, Holly actually in the Dominion uh, community that we have has a specific monthly offering called, actually, what is it called? It's
Somatics of EK.
Somatics VK, where you enter through the lens of the actual sensation that you're feeling instead of the story. So, Holly, do you want to talk a little bit more about what that is like?
Well, it's the great thing about EK is that you can come in through a multitude of lenses. There's no right or wrong way to come into the practice. And I think what'll happen is sometimes we'll get so wrapped up in the story and like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I'm supposed to be getting off and I'm not. And just getting wrapped up in this part. And I gestured to your head, but as we all know, your mind isn't necessarily in here. It may occupy this space, but this isn't where it lives. Your mind is something that interacts with your body. And um, like, I just got all, I love it because getting into story and instead being able to drop into like, what is happening in my body and not necessarily having to be like, oh, this is really like being able to name a sensation specifically and precisely. It can be a really like, I'm feeling something in my chest, or there is something in my chest. It doesn't have to be like when people hear other people talk about sensation or feeling, they hear these really specific things, and sometimes that can be an inroad. Like that can be, oh, that's what that feeling is. Or it can be really like distancing, like I never feel that I'm clearly doing this wrong. And instead, we can look at it as um like I'm having a tough time wrapping words around it because I'm having this big heat in my chest right now. Um
Holly,
yeah.
would you just like take us through that experience of having the heat in your chest right now? I think maybe because somatics is so experiential, because it is something we are like engaging with in the body. Yeah, words are hard. Do you feel comfortable doing that right now? Just kind of like showing us your process a little?
Yeah, yeah, of course. So it's like right now, it's like, oh, I'm getting to talk about the thing that is the thing for me, the thing that I love. And so there's this heat that rises in my chest and into my face. And I'm starting to like feel like I'm not just feeling it internally, like I'm feeling it on my skin. Like I'm feeling the cool air because I'm starting to sweat a little bit and feeling that like activation happening. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, so it's also really interesting like what happens in the body can like expand out and potentially affect
Break the
recordings.
internet.
Um uh, or at least break my internet. uh yeah, so the let me tap into it again. Let me take a beat. Because, yeah, it's really important to stay in tune with the body when you're holding space. I definitely had a tendency for a long time to entirely disassociate and focus on the other as opposed to using my body to understand what was happening in the container. Yeah. So my whole body is really hot right now. Before it was in my face, and now it's in all of me. And I'm noticing, like, that actually feels strangely really nice because there's a story around I've been cold all morning, and now I get to feel warm. And I get to like, this is being seen the way things actually are, what's actually happening. Um, and yeah, so noticing, like, the heat, it's starting to dissipate, but there's, like, this almost desire for like shifting side to side and wanting to move like this little for lack of better words like this dance that my body's wanting to do to move with this energy and uh, it's yeah, there's a desire to stretch and yeah. Oh, see, and now that's so funny, there's so sensation often, especially in big sensation moments when you're moving through a lot, it can come in waves. Like it'll settle and then it'll come back. Just like, and this is the sensation of yes, right? This is the current that we're working with in EK, right? Like this, oh, and it moves in waves. And I was starting to settle. And then it was like, oh my gosh, you're letting people see this. Oh my gosh. And the activation rises up again. And now it's this like cold fire in my chest. Like I can feel like this coldness, this pressure at the same time that it's radiating outward. And oh, and so instead of like trying to make it go away because I'm worried that people are going to see me acting weird on the internet, I'm letting it be. I'm letting it, oh. And then some nausea comes up, like, oh, how sweet. My body's trying to protect me by vomiting this up. Like, oh, 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 how. It's really something.
Well,
Um,
can I say what I really love about what's happening right now, Holly? Because first of
huh?
all, you're actually quite turning me on. I'm feeling rather warm and aroused in my own body just seeing you be so kind and attentive to your own body. First of all. And second of all, what I'm just noticing you do as a expert EK practitioner that I know you are is like you never once said like, "Oh my god, I'm so embarrassed." "Oh my gosh, like, I'm scared right now. Oh my gosh, I messed up." Because those are, like, the quick shorthands for those sensations because you've probably experienced similar sensations in those circumstances, so you just name them the experience that you were having when you originally felt those experiences. And I think that's how a lot of us get stuck in story in a very subtle way that's hard to untangle unless you watch somebody like Holly do what Holly just did. And she was just talking about, oh, there's like waves of sensation. There's warmth. Ooh, cold fire now. Oh, I'm going to throw up. And your like attitude towards those was just like, "Hello, cold fire. There you are. Oh, now vomiting has arrived." And just an equanimous hello to all of the sensations as they passed through your body, and uh, it was arousing. You seemed like also you were having a nice time noticing all of those things happen in your body. I was having a nice time watching you. It looked so good, you know? So I just like, to me, that was just a really amazing example of the somatic power coupled with the EK perspective of really just focusing on what's actually here without skipping to conclusion and just noticing and allowing and finding even a little bit of cheeky joy in it as it came and went. So thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Layla. And I think what's also really helpful to remember is that this is not always my experience. Like sometimes I'm like, I'm just in it and I'm just in it. And there's the watcher is absent. But I find sometimes it's easier to access the watcher when there are watchers that are so deeply and radically approving of what's happening, right? Like we don't, I mean, yes, we heal alone, but we also heal in connection with other people. In fact, like being witnessed, being held, and being seen is a huge part of it because shame only thrives in loneliness. Like shame can only thrive in secret. And in community, it becomes much, much harder for shame to keep its claws in you.
That is so, so true, Holly. That is such a good point. I've been really feeling that lately because I have this secret podcast where I share all my like dark and dirty secrets and feelings. And it is really hard when you know that other people are witness like it sort of gives you even without even without trying to present things in a certain way, just through the art of like opening up to being seen, it's like it invites that ability to witness yourself, especially when you know that the people witnessing you are holding you with that radical approval.
Totally. It feels like we're melding a little bit of this concept of the physiological nervous system and kind of the way that actually our nervous systems don't just exist within this like physical body with all the synapses because what would just happened and Holly spoke to is that not just one nervous system was present in that experience, but four nervous systems were. And so we lended some of our capacity to Holly so that Holly could be present in flowing with the experience of whatever the story around being seen is for Holly right now in this moment. And like Leia was saying, these more conventional words of like embarrassment or whatever that might come up for the majority of us that surface us into our brain of, oh, this is actually lack of capacity. This is how I need to shut down, pull in, contract. Um, Holly didn't have, well, Holly, what it's, I'm, ass- I'm in, I'm assuming Holly can correct me if I'm wrong. Holly's experience of that was a little different, oh, nausea. Okay, cool. Maybe this is a sense of contraction, but I can stay present with this because, first of all, Holly is a badass and has been doing this somatic work for many years and has a deep relationship with her body. And also, there were other nervous systems right now to help support in that.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, I want to be a little bit obstinate and just quote my late departed mentor, Dr. Robert, and say we are wounded in community, and so we heal in community. Um, because I certainly know that a lot of the shame that I personally think that shame comes from the outside. I think none of us are born with the inner sense of there's something wrong with me. I think all of us are born with just the innocent, pure love of self and love of life. And then we do something, and other people are like, why did you do that, you idiot? And then you feel wrong, But really, to your point, Holly, like whether we are wounded or heal in community, I certainly think community supports healing as much as it supports wounding. And that's why it can heal. And that's why it can wound, because we are impacted by our community. But also we heal ourselves, and also we take on wounds ourselves. And when we're children, we're not aware of our ability to take on or not take on. We're in a hypnotic state. I also recently learned that, learning about neurology, that children are in a purely hypnotic state for the first 7 years of their life. So I guess I just was like, wow, we all need to completely forgive ourselves for the things that we took on when we were little. We, we were completely powerless against that. But anyway, I really appreciate that it is something that we have to do, and we have to be willing to look at ourselves lovingly with the innate true perspective that we have on ourselves, that we come in as children with, that I love me. I'm wonderful. Isn't this wonderful? I'm here to love. And and turn that attention on yourself, you know? Like I just watched you do that. Turn that loving attention onto everything that came up for you.
So Holly did an amazing job showing us what it's like to go straight to the somatics of it. And I've been thinking about this for those of us that are more visual, auditory, and maybe you don't have that language for it, but or maybe you don't have any relationship to how you experience the world. But, as Laila has said, and neurology has said, and Dr. Robert has said, and many people have said, that actually the only way we experience the world is through our senses, right? So even if it's out of your awareness, that is the only way that you are experiencing the world, is through some combination of our senses. So I was thinking about this, like, what about those of us who it's kind of out of our awareness of this? I'm thinking about it as watching a movie, right? We all have watched TV or a movie, some sort of media outside of ourselves. And it may not be fully aware to you, but you are having an experience of it, right? You're not only taking in the information visually, but it's creating responses. You respond to it within your body, right? So maybe you are laughing, but are actual sensations and textures to what that laughter is, which you might use the words of like happiness, you know, joy, comedy, whatever. Or you are moved in such a way that tears come out of your eyes, right? Which may be, again, there's so many different textures that actually create tears, your tear ducts producing water. Some of them are actually sensations we deem positive, like joy, happiness, awe, and some are sensations that we deem very negative, like sadness, grief, um
Trail.
yeah, there you go, betrayal. And so I think that can also be an inroad, is recognizing that we all know how to watch a movie outside of ourselves and feel a response or acknowledge there are emotions happening, which is some texture of response within our body and our system. And then how do we start to notice that that is very similar to the experience that we're creating in our lives, the story. We use the word story a lot here, and I want to recognize that that's not to like diminish our experiences. It's just a word that we use to relate to the way that we construct images, texture, sound, smell, taste, uh, into a narrative of our.
Into something that means something. That's how
Yeah,
we make and that's how we make it all make sense.
yeah, exactly. That's how we create meaning. And meaning is a neutral thing. Sometimes
Meaning is, I think,
negative.
important.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, I
Well,
think what Danny's saying is that
yeah.
meaning doesn't necessarily have valence in and of itself. Like, it could
Yes.
be we could be creating positive meanings, we could be creating negative meanings.
And we prefer a negative meaning to meaninglessness. That's how important meaning is that we would rather make something make sense and it means horrible things than to say, wow, that just didn't mean anything at all.
Well, yeah, because that goes to our like primitive mammalian brain of like creating safety, right? We have a negative bias. There's much science that has been, there's a great book called The Buddha's Brain that talks about how we have a inherent uh, instinctual bias towards negativity because that creates a sense of safety for us. I feel like I'm getting a little off topic.
Well, to bring it back to EK, and sorry, I was just riffing on you. You were inspiring me so much with what you were saying, Nani, that I couldn't keep my mouth closed. But to bring it back to EK, the thing about meaning is really important, and the story is really important. I'm really glad that you spoke up in defense of the word of story, because it's, we're not trying to say that you shouldn't believe in stories, but there's an inherent motivation to make a story, to make our experiences make sense. We get all this sensory information and our brains are just like, all right, how do we fit this into the jigsaw puzzle of all the other information so that it all comes together as a sensible picture? What conclusion do I need to draw here? That's great. And in the absence of a story, we prefer a negative story to nothing at all. And I think that explains a lot of how so many of us just have ended up with baseline negative or, self-defeating or less than productive, less than optimistic beliefs and meanings about ourselves and lives and what that have happened to us. And we also have the power, and this I think where EK really comes in. EK comes in with the perspective of it is possible to experience everything as pleasure. It's possible to get off on every stroke, and it's possible to accept experience as it is, and the promise that just because we accept something as it is does not mean that it will always be that way. In fact, the more we accept things the way that they are, the easier things flow from one thing to the next. The
Yeah.
story unfolds.
Going off of that, it allows us to recognize that we actually have, I guess I don't want this word doesn't feel quite right, but some sort of power within the story of how we perceive and relate to the story. I think that's
Right.
the huge piece of EK.
Exactly. To even expand on what we were saying, that like our experience is entirely made up of our sensory information, our sensory input. Our experience isn't the extent and limit of our experience is entirely made up of our sensory neurological input and what we interpret that to mean.
Yes.
That is the limit and extent. And many of us are simply limited by we won't allow ourselves to make things mean something lovely and wonderful and peaceful and good enough. And that's the simple change that needs to happen for everything to be good and fine and lovely and good enough.
Oh yeah.
That's my Pollyanna soapbox for this episode. I'll try and be a little bit darker. Oh, and again, I guess to your point, also to reiterate what you're saying, Dani, that is our dominion. We have dominion and power and authority and agency over that part. We may or may not have dominion and agency over the sensory inputs, but we definitely, absolutely have unquestionable dominion over the part that makes sense of it all.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Holly, you
Well,
look like you want to say
Joint
something.
dominion.
Well, I was just thinking, like, to say it like really succinctly, like EK makes it possible to enjoy the story. That's what the dominion is. Like, we get to enjoy the story, and we don't have to pay attention to any story that we can't find pleasure in, like, as we move through the practice. Yeah. It's executing choice, executing our dominion, right? Like, we get to choose what our stories are and how we feel about them. And I'm not saying like that, it's a practice, but it is possible.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I just want to point out that we're kind of getting at here, that we're pointing to, is that there's actually two ways that we can enter EK. We can come in from a story. That's sort of the traditional way that's described in the book, is like having a don't like situation that you've sort of like pre-chosen. And then you go into that story and then you evoke the sensations and work with it from there. But what we're also suggesting is that you can just work directly with the sensations. And as you're doing that, notice if stories are trying to pop up. And instead of going along with those stories, doing exactly what Holly demonstrated for us earlier and just being with the sensation and just sort of following the sensation without having to assign meaning to it.
Yeah, and I think I want to say something like it's within the body that's the domain that we actually get to relate to the story and
Mhm.
can engage and go through some sort of like potential transformation change relationship with the
Yes.
story.
Yes, I think that that's really key because the stories are coming from the physical experience of it. The sensory experience is what is sort of what we're translating that into the story. So with EK, I do think there are ways, like with hypnosis, and I do think there are methods where you can go in with the mind and change a story, definitely. But with EK, the transformation is happening at the level of the body.
I think I feel like EK is happening at like the spiritual level and the somatic level, and kind of like leaving some of the mental level out if one is doing it. I think you're really holding the most material pole with the most like refined, just loving awareness pole, and that is doing the magic. And there are certainly, I think that therapy and certainly some of the destination method, neuro-linguistic programming, and Dr. Roberts' work is working more on different layers of mind, and certainly Dr. Roberts' methods touch on the spiritual, but the mind is more what we're like. People are used to talking to therapists, and that is much of that is happening in mind. And I think many people are healed spiritually, and many people are healed somatically. Like, how many people, I think a lot of, people can relate to the experience of like, you know, suddenly experiencing rage and disliking their partner or hating their children or resenting their job, and then go to the doctor and find out that was my hormones. And then their hormones get changed, and then their mental state gets changed. That's like a purely physical solution to that problem. And that person could have gone to therapy, but what was the most effective and like root cause of that problem was like a hormonal imbalance. So anyway, healings can happen all along the spectrum, but I think existential kink is happening when the spiritual and the material are mating with one another.
Mm, thank you. I don't know. Is there even more to say after that?
Join us in Dominion.
This was so fun. Thank you guys so much. Bye.
I
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Penetrate Radio. I have a free guided existential kink practice. If you are somebody who is new to this work, if you're new to EK, if you haven't read the book, if you're just not a reader, or if you need a refresher, you can get this. You can download it right now for free and use it to learn how to do EK and just follow along as a guided practice. It is meant for beginners. So I just want to let you know that that's available, and you can find it at the link in the description. Also, in the link in the description, you can find more information about our membership Dominion, a field of radical approval. Dominion is less than the cost of a single manicure each month, and it's just a wonderful place to do this work in community. We have seen time and time again that being witnessed and witnessing others in this work is wildly helpful and validating. The last thing I want to mention is that a lot of our guests talk about the coach certification program Penetrate that they went through with myself and Laila. I want to let you know that we are going to be offering that same program again in 2027, and you can find a wait list in that same link if you're interested in getting information about that when it becomes available. And I think this goes without saying, but if you see anyone else offering a program called Penetrate that is also a coach certification program related to this kind of work, that is absolutely not the same program that Laila and I have taught and that the people in this podcast are talking about when they talk about our coach certification program, Penetrate. So I just wanted to make that super clear. Laila and I share a lot of hard-won wisdom through that program. So if we're not the ones teaching it and offering it, then it is definitely not the same program. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Penetrate Radio, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.